Ari was born on December 30th, 1959. Ari was supposed to be born very close to my birthday, March 7th, but he was born a little over 2 months premature. And in fact, at the time, he was the lightest baby ever to survive in New Jersey. He weighed 1 pound, 14 ounces when he was born in 1959, at a time when babies that weight did not survive, period. At the time, the hospital told my parents not to give Ari a name because he would not live. And he was in an incubator for 30 days. And after about a week or maybe 10 days, they told my parents that it looked like there was a reasonable chance he was going to live. They had no idea what condition he would be in, but they could go ahead and give him a name. So they gave him the name of Ariel, which is Hebrew for lion, because he had fought so much to stay alive. I think they suspected right then, when he was born, that there were going to be problems, but they had no idea if there were going to be physical problems or, mental problems. They just hadn't dealt with people who had been born that premature and survived. There just weren't enough of them to know what the possibilities would be.
Our mom was born in Chicago, but she grew up in Los Angeles, as did my father. They met in high school. Her mother had been a refugee from Russia in the early part of the last century. And my dad had come over from Austria. And I'm not quite sure, but I think it was as sort of the Nazi situation was starting to grow. So both of them were kind of refugees to America from, situations that were very difficult. We were farm kids. Our parents were chicken farmers. That's what we grew up doing, is helping on the farm, and so did Ari, all three of us. I think the thing with Ari was when he was real young, it seemed like things were fine. There wasn't this difficulty of he was odd or anything like that for the first while. He was generally, as I remember, he was real well behaved. He just was, he was like a baby growing up, and he was small, but he wasn't, a munchkin or anything. But it wasn't very long before the issues came up with Ari. And as I remember, they started because he just wasn't showing the kind of communication things that kids start showing at a young age, right? He didn't speak. He'd make sounds occasionally, but things seemed to be going slower than they normally would have. But it was a very long time before anyone was able to figure out what the issues were. Autism was nothing like as understood in the 60s as it is now. It was like, what are we going to do with Ari, and what's the future in a situation where even the experts were pretty clueless.
The story that I most remember is that when he was maybe 6 years old, 7 years old, and my parents were told that the best place in the country for children like Ari was a residential home in New Jersey. The experts said, this is the one place where he will learn to talk. We take kids who don't talk, and they come out of here and they're talking. And my parents were incredibly excited about this. One of the first rules was you could not visit your child or talk to your child for a month after the child was there. They wanted the child to separate from the parents. And so after a month, my parents went down to visit, and they saw that Ari had bruises, many bruises on his legs, bruises on his arms, numerous bruises. And they asked them how Ari got all these bruises. And at first they were sort of reluctant, but then they basically said, the reason Ari doesn't talk is because he's lazy. And kids like this, you have to hit them to get them to talk. And my parents agonized over this because they said, we can't allow this to happen.
This was a constant challenge for them because obviously they've never been around an autistic person in their lives, or at least not knowingly. And so every once in a while they're taking Ari to someone who presumably can help, and they're getting this feedback and trying to figure out what to do with it. It was just I mean, it was very hard on them.
We got a complete test when he was 4.5, and they told us that Ari was severely retarded, which was quite a blow to us. And we put him in a preschool program for retarded children, which was the only thing in this area at that time. He was there for 2 years, and then when it came time for him to go to school, the only thing they had available was a program for retarded children. Well, he lasted about 1 month in that program. It was inappropriate. He cried constantly. They started looking around for another program. Then they decided, well, he must be emotionally disturbed. So he spent 3 years in a school for emotionally disturbed children, which was also inappropriate, made little, if any, progress there.
And then Eden came along, and Ari, I guess, started in the day program at Eden.
Yeah, I was 77, I think. That's when our folks found out about Eden. At some point, they met Dave Holmes, and they're like, maybe this is someplace Ari can go next year if things didn't get better. And, you know, in the public schools, things really never got better.
You seem to recall that he was in a church basement or something like that. I can't quite remember. My mom was very plugged in because she'd organized a parents group for special needs kids that was meeting and putting pressure on the schools for more services, demonstrating in Trenton at the Capitol, doing all this kind of stuff. My mom was not exactly a classic activist, but when she got riled up, she got riled up.
Eden was like paradise after everything our folks had been through and Ari had been through. And went there for 4 years and graduated in 81. Just coming home to visit and having Ari be pretty happy and my parents be not constantly having to advocate or wonder was just a great blessing.
And now, the question is, what do they do when the parents start getting significantly older? And how do you take care of the kid? What happens when the parents die? And you have a 55-year-old severely autistic child. What happens to that child?
I'm 50 years old. I am not going to live forever. I have to find a place where my son can work, can be productive. There need to be things like group homes, independent living for young people. I don't know if our autistic children are up to that, but certainly group homes are places where they can become productive citizens, because if we spend all this time and effort in educating them, and then we say, okay, you're 21, that's it, or you're 20, it's a tremendous waste of time and human potential.